At about the age of 8 or 9, I can remember building a crystal set with a cat's whisker and a piece of germanium attached to a headset. I found this fascinating, and when I was about 11, I built a bigger radio that used one tube, and I put it all in a box. I even remember the tube number. It was a 1S4, and it ran on a big dry cell battery that was bigger than the radio. In 1945, when I was 12, I went for my ham radio ticket and got my first license. The call sign that was given me was VE3BCF. VE means Canada, 3 means Ontario, and BCF is my personal identification. 1 year later, and after learning the Morse code at 12 words per minute, I applied for my advanced license so that I could make voice transmissions. This allowed me to work or contact other radio stations on all radio and shortwave frequencies. Over the years, my equipment changed quite a bit. I could never afford the real expensive stuff, so I did what they call homebrew. Now it's called DIY or do-it-yourself. Some of my projects were hacked together from articles and schematics in various magazines. Later, I bought some kits that were produced by a company called Heathkit, a marvelous company that supplied all of the parts and diagrams, and you just had to put it together. Sadly, this company disappeared, I think sometime in the 60s. In 1949, our family moved from our Lyngrove Avenue home in the Kingsway to open up a business on Yonge Street in Midtown Toronto called John R. Clapp Shoes. I remember building an intercom system with a microphone attached to the front window of the store so I could listen in to the comments of the passers-by. Most commented how ugly the shoes were. It was true. After all, it was a corrective shoe store, and the shoes were really ugly. My dad called them Donald Ducks because the shoes were made in sizes up to 9 triple E's wide. A few years later, I left school in the middle of grade 11, and on my way home, I stopped off at Canadian Electrical Supply, applied for a job, and was hired before I got home. There is a lot more to this story in my episode about business life. Martin Rosenthal, the owner's son, and also the same age as me, came over to see my ham shack. Anyone that had a radio license was called a ham, and the radio station was referred to as a shack. We were called hams because that's what we sounded like, unprofessional radio announcers. My friend Martin was bitten by the radio bug and traveled all over the world to broadcast from exotic DX locations. DX means long distance. Martin had a lot of influence with the DOT, Department of Transport, and one day, while in my office at Electrosonic, I complained to him about my call sign being too long when sending Morse code, and wished that I had a shorter one. But these are very rare and almost impossible to get. A couple of days later, there was a note on my desk saying that my new call was VE3WX. A 2-letter call is very prestigious. My call WX also means weather. In the 1960s, while raising a young family in Scarborough, I erected a huge antenna in the backyard. It was 70 foot high with a 6-element beam that measured 40 feet from front to back and 40 feet from tip to tip. Before raising it to the top of the tower, it filled the whole backyard. When working long-distance DX, the most important thing by far is the size and height of your antenna. Other activities that hams did were field days and transmitter hunts. On field days, we would camp out of town somewhere and use portable equipment, batteries and such, and see how many stations we could work, usually over a weekend, without breaking down. It was kind of a training exercise for emergency communications. Another popular activity was the transmitter hunts. This is where a radio amateur would hide somewhere in the countryside, and the rest of us, with radios in our cars, driving around, would try to find the location of the hidden transmitter. Great fun. A big part of the ham radio hobby was exchanging QSL cards. These were like postcards that you exchanged with somebody that you talked to over the radio to prove that you worked the location or the country. My most exotic contact was from Antarctica with a group of scientists. When I asked their location in relation to the South Pole, they replied that they were on it. Their call letters were VK0VK. The zero in their call sign means maritime mobile or no permanent location. During my ham radio years, I worked over 300 countries and have a box full of QSL cards. The equipment is all gone, but I've kept the QSL cards. I guess the last time I used ham radio was in 1990 at the farm in Thomasburg, Ontario, while doing astrophotography.
2208. Okay, real good, Larry. IK7DBB from KJ4DX.
It was a great activity for cloudy nights. If you can't take pictures of the heavens, you can always talk to people somewhere else on this planet. The only radio equipment that has survived is my Bug, a semi-automatic keyer I use to send Morse code. I have a fond attachment to this, and I've never forgotten the Morse code.